to the preacher. Yet, in another sense, it is the humblest kind of service. You recognize that you have no rights. You recognize as a servant of God, you have no rights. To think you deserve to do it because of who you are. Paul was a servant of Jesus Christ, which meant he had to absolutely obey. He had to obey. You have to obey what God says. You have no right of your own. You're not your own. You're bought with a price. You've been called by God. Number two, he was a preacher of the gospel. As a servant of Jesus Christ and an apostle of Jesus Christ. He was a called apostle. He didn't decide on his own that he's going to do this or he's going to do that, because God decided. God effectually called him to that office. He was not appointed by man, but by God. Acts chapter 9, I believe. Acts chapter 9 and verse 15. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. Look at Acts chapter 22 and verse 14. Acts chapter 22 and verse 14. And he said, The God of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. Chapter 26 and verse 16. 26:16. But rise, and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose, to make thee a minister and a witness both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things in which I will appear unto thee. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 16. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 16. For though I preach the gospel, for though I am a preacher, though I am an apostle, though I am a missionary, I have nothing to glory of. Of necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. So there is the mix of what it is called to be a preacher. If you are going to preach Jesus Christ, you better know he called you. I've always said this. If you know, listen, the only way you'll ever stay in a ministry is know you have been called. Do you think at any time in Paul's life, when that first trip he took into one of the cities and he had to be ushered out in a basket over the wall, or he was going to be killed, do you not think he said, maybe I missed my call? Do you think when he was on that shipwreck and he was bound and the ship broke apart, he said, you think maybe I missed my call? Do you not think that there are many, many, many times in the life of many preachers and servants of God that they don't say, this has got to, maybe I missed the call. Maybe I've just been proud of thinking I've been called to preach. Maybe I should try something else. And here we are again, aren't we? God's preachers have this ability, the stickability, to stay with it when they probably should stay down. Unfortunately, we watched that movie. I forgot which one. I think it was a couple of movies, and they kept getting beaten up. And they kept getting up. They jumped up, went right towards him, told him what they were going to do, and they got decked. All four of them just kept getting hit. They kept getting up. And the guy says, if you got any sense, you're going to stay down. You're going to stay down and quit. And they get back up again. I said, whew, that does sound like people that if they had good sense, they'd stay down. But woe is me if we don't do what God has called us to do. Apostle. It means sent one. That word means commissioned one. It means you've been dispatched. It means that you are a messenger. You are an ambassador. Now, I'm sure God could use someone else, but God planned for Paul to write at least 11 or 12 books of the New Testament before he ever wrote them. And at any time, Paul could have quit. Paul didn't quit because God still had something for him to do. I'm sent, but not a self-made decision. I'm sent 78 times, he said that. The story of an old black preacher. I should say an African-American, I suppose, but an old black preacher pastored a small country church, a humble and godly man. From the heart he preached. One Sunday night, a young man came to preach in his church. You know how these young men are? Cocky, self-assurance, thought he was more than the people deserved. And it was apparent that his attitude was not one of love and compassion. You've seen those guys, right? When he finished preaching, the old black preacher came up to him and said, "Young man, was you sent or did you just went?" Young man, was you sent or did you just went? That happens so often, doesn't it? Some just go and sin and not sent, and Paul knew he was sent. So that word means to be sent. Richard Baxter said, you better go back and see if you are redeemed. He's the one that wrote the Reformed Pastor. 100 pages of that to be sure God sent you. I'm always doing that. 100 pages to see if God really sent you. And you want to know if you... I want to find out if God really sent me. It ain't worth it if He didn't. There is an official sense of the word that the apostle also. But it also is a small s. A small a was someone who held the office within the church. All Christians are little a apostles sent into the world to preach the gospel. Paul was of the official office of an A. We're all preachers of the gospel. But some have been called to preach officially the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul qualified because he saw Christ on the Damascus road. Well, Paul was a man who was called. Now, as I read this text, I'm asking myself, have I been called? You can ask yourself, has God called me to be one of His servants? God not only calls the pastor to be a servant. When He calls you, He calls you also to love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might and with all your mind. And so here's what you need to ask yourself. Would you not say, has God called me? Do I love the Lord with all my soul, with all my mind, with all my spirit, with all of my energy? Have I been called? Has God called me out from the darkness of this world, transformed me from darkness to light? Has God called me to be a bride of Jesus Christ? There's nothing wrong in examining ourselves to see where we're at. Because He'll reaffirm time and time again that if we stay under the shadow of His wings through all the calamities of life, He will stay with us. He's our refuge in time of trouble. It is a position of dignity but it also is a position of humility to be a bride of Jesus Christ. Shall we stand, please?